Yeah. Boards. Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and over to this side of me, look carefully, and you will see the person who I've never seen their hips. It is a person known as Shem Phillips.
Oh, hello.
Shem is wearing a baseball style hat, and I can see it's geek written upon that. Shem Phillips has made a series of games. North Sea West Kingdom, you probably know their names. And there's 6 of them so far, but with 6 more to come. And it is quite a good run. Sorry for this terrible rhyming. I mean, it's improvised. Like, kind of what do you expect? You know what? I shouldn't stop it, but we're going to stop the singing because it's not very good. We're going to start conversing as we possibly should at the start of the show, but I'll have to ask you to put up with 1 more second of singing. Board games is what we're talking about. Board games and designing a series. I'm not going to shout, hey, good morning, or evening, good night, or you know what, I'm bed. It is properly bedtime for one of us. And it is 11 p.m., I believe, in. Sorry, can you pronounce your city's name?
I'm in Waikanae.
Why can I? I'm. I had seen it written down, but I'd never actually attempted to pronounce it, so I just didn't want to get it completely wrong. So 11 p.m. Why can I? And so thank you so much for joining me for this slightly later thing, because our clocks have tweaked by a couple of hours since last time we spoke, I believe. It
Yeah,
is
that's right.
now getting into your summertime. Is it any different for you now? Like, is it warmer?
It is getting warmer. Yep. Yeah.
So, like, apropos of nothing, like, New Zealand has proper seasons. It's not like Singapore where you just get warm thing throughout the day. And we are talking about making a series. I'm excited to talk to you about this because this is something that I thought there's a lot that goes into making a series. Obviously, you've got 6 previous ones. You've got some spin-offs. You've got some expansions for those ones. But also, you are. It seems to be such a big bulk of your work right now. And I thought that you would have a lot of thoughts about this to process. What's good about a series? What's difficult about a series? How do we keep it similar? How do we keep it different? Yeah, let's get stuck into it. And any other questions that come up into the chat, I'll be, yeah, posing. But before anything else, we need to talk about brilliant things. Brilliant things. What's a little thing which is brilliant?
So I've gone very much industry on this. So this is my die cutter.
Hmm.
This actually is the reason why most my game, like the cards in my games, have a strange size. So it cuts cards. I think it's mainly designed to cut PVC. Maybe not quite legal cards, but it's. I got it for I think it was about 180 New Zealand dollars. So it's about £100, like 10 years ago maybe, or even longer. It's a bit rusty, but it still cuts my prototype cards perfectly. So that's my cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, just I've never seen properly a die cutter before, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I mean, this feels a little bit more live than just watching a YouTube video. And why not? Why don't you just use big scissors? Like,
Because it cuts them like as a perfect card with rounded edges and everything. So I can print a sheet with 16 cards, cut it in 4 columns, and you just go bang, 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 bang. Your card's perfectly cut. Yeah.
so basically, what I'm hearing is that you're a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to getting those shapes for your prototypes.
So when I'm like doing the original, the early prototypes, it's always just card sleeves. But when I want to actually
Chris.
print them out so they fit into the base game, and you don't really notice the difference. If you look at the card stock, you notice it's different. But we can like send out a pack of these to like another to a local playtester, and they can add it into their set like fairly seamlessly, rather than going to the manufacturer and asking for cards that match and everything. We just do it locally. So yeah.
I mean, that's pretty useful. So it sounds like when you get to that sort of high quality prototype, it's like that last step before mass production. You don't even go out of house for that.
Yeah, I used to actually make a lot of my original games like with that. So when I was just before I was really fully doing this like for a job, I was doing it for a hobby for 6 years. So I would just hand make most of my games. I'd like cut the cards myself with that thing. I'd slap a sticker on a small box and fold it up, and then chuck in a locally printed rule book, and then I'd make like 20 copies of something. So
Nice.
that was the good old days.
And hello to Vrufel and Zucker. I think that means dice and sugar. Who say they just stumbled upon the stream after talking to their colleagues yesterday evening, wondering which next series might be coming from Shem. Greetings from Würfel and Zucker Board Game Cafe. I don't know what city that's in, but given the name, I assume it's somewhere in Germany. And lovely to have you in the chat. Have you already announced what the name of the South place is going to be?
No, we haven't announced the title, but we've definitely said it's South. So yeah.
But you've not announced whether it's going to be the South Hills or the
No.
South Plains or
We're still
South
working on that, but it's
Southern Desert.
we'll see.
I mean, maybe. Oh, apparently they're from Hamburg. But are you open to suggestions? Do you want ideas? Do you want people to randomly say things that you might take as inspiration, or do you have a solid thing that you're just not sharing?
We may have a solid thing, but it's not set in stone as such. So
Okay, so if people want to just after Sea and Kingdom, what else
what
can
comes
be?
next?
Oh my gosh, Paul Grogan, it's lovely to see you. And just tuning in to hear about your new series of games set in Devon. The Southern Isles. Oh, that would be good. Southern Isles, yeah. Anyway, so let's get to recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. Now, of course, last weekend there were two very important conventions. One, because it's normally the biggest physical convention in the world for board games. Spiel, it went digital, of course, this year. We could talk about that, but, yeah, I don't know. I assume you didn't kind of engage at all with that, Shem, or...
No, I didn't do anything with it. So
We're
lazy,
going
I
to
know.
have a bit of a debrief in 8 days' time on Tuesday with a bunch of people who exhibited there to kind of talk to them about their perspective and do a bit of a debrief and compare it to the original thing. But one thing that for me is even more exciting, and I will be talking to them on Friday evening at 8 p.m. UK time, which I believe makes it 9 a.m. New Zealand time, which are Adrian and CD from WellyCon. And WellyCon is New Zealand's biggest convention, and yeah, you went there, as I believe you always do.
Yeah, usually always. Yeah.
And how was that? If I
That
can...
was great. Yeah. So it's that's our actual main WellyCon's usually in July, and that got cancelled fully because of COVID. And then we usually do a mini WellyCon the weekend just been. So they thought let's kind of merge them together since we missed out on the main WellyCon. And they did a sort of a halfway. So it's still in the same location as the mini WellyCon, which is a bit smaller, but we got a lot more people through the door. So it was great. I got to play a bunch of games, did some play testing, and just hanging out with friends.
Yeah, I... Congratulations to all of you for kind of getting it down to a safe level. Hello to Xate, it's lovely to see you. And hello to Travis, who says, yes, Jay from 3 Minute Board Games went there as well. Paul, thank you for the tech thing. Unfortunately, this software doesn't allow me to individually turn up people, mostly Do you have a mic that allows you to turn yourself up at all, Shem, or not?
Nah, not on this one. Well, I can plug in my other one, but last time we tried it, apparently it was distorting. So
You know what I'll do is I will move myself a little bit further away, so
yeah,
maybe I'm a little bit quieter, and maybe that'll work. I don't know. Does that make any difference? I'm sorry, Paul. I'm sorry to everyone for yeah, but hopefully, if you turn you down, um, yeah, my inputs. I don't know how I can do that because I don't use Streamlabs. I'm sorry, Paul,
I
but
think if you turn
thank you
your
for.
the microphone down on your actual on your PC or Mac on the actual volume controls, that's probably what he's
Uh,
meaning. My one's on Max, so I can't turn it up any higher.
um,
I could just yell at everyone. I could yell. Is that good?
I don't.
I might
Oh,
wake my
here we
children
go.
though.
Microphone sharing. Microphone control sharing. Um, I'm very sorry. I don't know how to do this, and so I'm going to. Hopefully, it's not too bad for everyone else. But yeah, maybe I'll just be a wee bit quieter. So I'll just talk a wee bit quieter like this. And so thank you to everyone. And yeah, Paul says yell. And okay, let's talk about recent highlights. For me, a recent highlight was this. So this is ohne alcohol, which means without alcohol. It was something that I bought at Essen 2019. I just opened it last night. It kind of tastes like honey and lemon mixed together. And it's got a suspension of, I think it says actual amber. I'm not sure what the German says, but maybe since we've got multiple German people in chat, maybe some of them can tell me. And um, that was a lovely thing. We had a remote dinner, which is a kind of tradition that's on Sunday after Essen. Alan, Charlie, Paul, myself, Tony Boydell, um, Andrew, Jenny. We have a bit of a dinner on Sunday nights in Germany. Like, obviously, we weren't in Germany, we weren't together, we weren't able to hug, but we were able to all get something to eat ourselves. And so that kind of kept that feeling a little bit alive. It was better than nothing. Do you have any other highlights that you would like to chat about from the past couple of weeks?
Definitely, WellyCon is always a highlight for me. I think I was talking about it yesterday. How we probably only play board games for like 50% of the time we're there. The rest is just hanging out and chatting and laughing and driving to try and find places that are open for food. So it's always good just catching up with my friends there.
And Sate asked me to keep it still, so hopefully that helps you. Honig Schatz Bernstein Glut. Um, oh, and morning Aquasilus. It is lovely to see you. But yeah, while I'm waiting for Sate to translate this, let's move to the questionably quick questions. So let's start off with the obvious one. What are you drinking, Shem?
I am drinking Lewis Road Creamery fresh chocolate milk, which is mixing Whittaker's chocolate with New Zealand fresh milk. So it's all made in New Zealand. So yeah. I know it's a big boy drink, but it's delicious. And I love chocolate milk, so I don't care if you think I'm a boy. It's a man drink to me. So it's actually really, really nice though. It's quite rich and very smooth.
Apparently, Sate says it says Amber Embers, so it's real amber. It was €7 at Spiel 2019. So, yeah, other people are all about the chocolate milk. There's no shame in enjoying those childish things.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the most childish thing you have enjoyed in the past 2 weeks? I mean, can we go even more childish?
Other than chocolate milk, that's a tough one. I'm not sure. Um, don't know.
Like, what's the silliest, most childish game you enjoy?
I don't know. It's not something I often think about, to be honest. I mean, I play Galaxy Age with my girls. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting comment.
Um, so let me ask you, we talked about music last time, we talked about your bands. We don't need to get into all of that, but what is the last band that you listened to?
I've been doing a bit of a nostalgic thing lately. So a band I used to listen to when I was in my early teens called Project A6 recently put their first album on Spotify, so I've just been doing that. Um, and an old punk band from my early years, Slick Shoes, put out a new album, so get on that nostalgic buzz. I like mainly kind of punk, hardcore, metalcore, that kind of stuff, but also like some more chill post rock kind of stuff as well. But
Sounds like for you, music gives you a fair bit of energy and really permeates your life.
yeah, I just love music that's got like a lot of passion to it and and feel and energy and stuff. So yeah, it's either gonna make me feel nice and good or just punch me in the face. One of those two. That's good. That kind of music.
Wait, so you enjoy being punched in the face?
Only by music. Yeah.
Okay. So this is not an invitation for people to.
Please no. Yeah. I'll probably cry.
Have you ever been in a fight?
About three when I was younger. Yeah. Or high school.
Oh, it's a feel-good face punch.
It is.
And Vervul and Sukur says, Honigschatz, honey treasure. Yes, it doesn't normally brew mead. Bernstein Glutz is just a fancy name. Amber Glow. I will have to check in with them about their actual ingredients, or just maybe enjoy it, and maybe I'll bring it. Yeah, I'll just enjoy it later this afternoon and finish it off. It kind of. Do you have sadness about finishing a bottle of something?
Nah, I'm a completionist, so I usually rush it and then I go, I should have saved it. You know. Yeah. I like finishing things.
Do you ever? What was the last time you travelled?
To Wellington yesterday.
No, I
That's
mean like
yeah,
outside of.
that's like an hour drive. The last time I traveled further than that would have been wow, it's been a long time. Probably late last year. We up to Piha, which is about an 8 hour drive north. So I
Hmm.
haven't been out of the country since about a year and a half, I think. So
Yeah, I mean obviously the past pretty
years
much.
a write off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. Do you feel like New Zealand is stable? Do you feel proud of your country?
Yeah, definitely. I think the government's done a great job of actually locking it down. We still get the occasional kind of like little outbreak, then it gets quickly clamped down. So yeah, they're still doing updates every day to let us know what's happening. But I generally feel very safe. But I do work from home, so there's that. But even going to Wellington, where there's like probably close to 300 people in a room, I didn't feel unsafe, which was good.
Hmm. I mean, the whole statistic of there being basically zero cases in public, how, I mean, you're not an, what's the word I'm looking for? Virologist, epidemic, like, someone who studies
Yep,
infections.
virologist. Yep.
But yeah, do you feel kind of secure that this is all correct and the government is really on top of things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're definitely like. I think we probably were a bit too relaxed at first, even though they did a great job. We didn't do things like wear masks and things for a long time. So now they're really pushing that a lot more. But we had an outbreak in Auckland City, which is like one third of our population in one city. So they basically locked down just the city, and the rest of the country was in a sort of a semi-lockdown state. So, and that proved to work. It only took about 3 weeks to get back to normal after that. So, feeling pretty safe. But you never know; it takes weeks to sometimes show. So, yeah,
And I'd like to ask, are you a hugger?
I hug. I've been known to hug.
Uh, like now going to Wellicon and everyone for the next 1 or 2 minutes, if you want to chuck in any random questions, please feel free to do so, and then I'm going to stop the questionably quick questions and get a bit more on topic. But I'd like to just ask a little bit more about how was the atmosphere? Were people hugging? Were people embracing? Were people relieved to kind of finally see each other after a year, presumably, of not seeing each other at this convention? Because conventions are normally a time of people gathering, and then you don't see each other sometimes until the next one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was definitely hugs going around that I saw. So yeah, but you also saw the occasional kind of elbow bump, but it was kind of more of a hint, like stay safe kind of thing. It wasn't a real serious thing. But yeah, but it was sanitized everywhere. Some people had masks on, so people are still taking it seriously, I think. But we're more relaxed, I suppose, now.
Well, thank you for the comments, Manuel. It's lovely to have you watching. And oh, we've got an actual question. I'd like to know about the branding. You know what? This leads us perfectly into the main topic. Distinguishing the branding. And so, yeah. So this is a great question. So let's move in to the main topic. Feel free to comment, ask questions, like, follow. We are now talking about making a series, and so yeah, ask any questions that are a little bit more serious. So let's get into this. I There's not a specific question here. I guess the question I'm going to interpret this as, how did you come up with the branding for the games?
So I set out to make one game originally. So Shipwrights of the North Sea was the first game. So all the kind of logo structure and font faces and graphic design style all came from that game. And the graphic design style has evolved a bit since then, but it's very much quite similar. Um, so the second game, obviously, as a follow up, I just thought, well, I won't. Why would I change the font face on the box cover? Why would I, try and make it look very different? So I just went with the same kind of style. I'm by no means a great graphic designer. I just do what I can do. So I just stayed within my limitations and made it work. And then by the time I got to the end of the trilogy, I was throwing around like, do I change artists? Do I change graphic design, the logos? Like, do I completely make a whole new trilogy that doesn't look anything like the original? And I went back and forward for like probably 6 months on that. And then eventually just thought, why don't I just change the box color? It's like, because people are used to seeing that kind of arching logo. They're used to seeing Miko's artwork. So it just made sense not to change that because it'd be too jarring. So yeah, that's how we kind of set the trilogies apart, is by the colors of the box. As far as setting apart each game, that's definitely could be confusing if you don't understand. I mean, I answered some questions on Twitter yesterday. I think it was someone just going, basically asking like, what are the games? What are the expansions? Like, please break it down for me. So, I basically have the base games are like person's name or job title of the something something. So it's always like Shipwrights of the North Sea, Raiders of the North Sea, and then the main expansions are always some sort of alliteration. So Age of Artisans, or Rocks of Ruin, Hall of Heroes. So that's kind of a way to spot them, I guess. And there's a few little spin-off mini expansions like the Townsfolk expansion for Shipwrights or the Crew expansion. So some of them don't follow that format, but the main kind of stuff does.
And then you've got like the spin-off standalone.
Raiders of Scythia, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was like very important that we changed the style for that one, because I didn't want people to think it belonged in the trilogies. So we changed the art, changed the graphic design, and just made it so it's very much a separate thing. The only thing that ties it together is Raiders and the mechanics, obviously.
Do you consider that to be like its own entity, a complete reimagining that, is almost like with the benefits of hindsight? Is that how that came about?
Yeah, it's very much. I think it's probably further than that, but it's trying to think. Like Pandemic versus Pandemic Iberia, but probably a bit further changed than those two. But it's that same kind of idea of, you've got this game that people have been enjoying for 5 years, and now I've got 5 years more experience. What would I do with the game? How would I change it? that was the kind of approach of it. And it was very much inspired by looking at my shelf of like 4 copies of Pandemic in various forms, thinking like, well, maybe I should revisit this game I designed close to 6 years ago and give it a new treatment.
And Manuel says, knowing about the professions helps. I'm sure it will be easier once I have a chance to play them all. And the other question is more of, was it your own idea? Like, let's actually, like, it's your company, it's, Gary Phillips and Robin kind of honoring your parents, which love. And do you make all the decisions for every game that you publish?
Yeah, so I started this thing out as a hobby. So it's just me for, well, it's been me for probably 9 to 10 years. Um, and obviously just paying artists to do the work because I can't draw to save my life. But yeah, I'm basically the only person behind it until Sam McDonald joined me with the West Kingdom series to start co-designing. But Sam's very much in the shelfie stickers. He's very much in the designer role, and I'm still in the publisher and developer kind of role.
And so all the branding is your decision. And like, when it comes to branding, like, do you have anyone else who really gives you any inputs at this point, or is it just occasionally a fan will come up with something and you think, oh yeah, that, and is it, yeah.
Yeah, there's always stuff that you can get. People can give you ideas. So I remember that my friend Andrew, when I think I designed Hall of Heroes, the first expansion for Raiders. Well, they came out at the same time, but I designed Hall of Heroes and had like another 6 months of time. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try to design another expansion. And it was my friend Andrew that kind of said, oh, maybe you can wound your crew. And I was like, that's an interesting idea. I didn't thought of doing that. And it lowers their strength. That's interesting. So there's always like friends and playtesters that can inspire mechanisms or inspire maybe a theme for a game. So the first South game that we're working on now is very much the theming, the story is driven by Sam McDonald's research he's been doing. So it's kind of his little baby. So it's good. I'm not the only one kind of building the brand now.
Mm, yeah, that's awesome. And Verfel and Sukkar has a couple of, so they talked about, yeah, just there might be more of their circadians. I don't know if you want to say
Yeah,
anything in response to that.
yeah. So there's hopefully next year. I think we'll see it next year. We're working on the second Circadians game, so it's going to be a very different game than the first one. First one's a dice placement kind of engine building game. This one's like a area control, almost dudes on a map style battle game, but it's all asymmetric, or not fully asymmetric, but very asymmetric races in the game. Um, and it's all designed by Sam McDonald and Zachary Smith, who's another Kiwi currently living in Italy. So they designed a lot of it through Tabletopia, which is quite interesting. Um, so it's a pretty big game. The artwork's going to take a long time to finish, but I've seen almost all the character art now, and it's looking pretty cool. So we got 2 more alien races we're bringing in, and yeah, it's going to be a good one, I think.
I mean, I thought this had already been confirmed, but let's just confirm it for those who catch people up to speed. There are going to be free games in the south and free games in the east, and they are all going to have D'Amico's artwork. And I think you had already said elsewhere that the south was going to be yellow. And last time you were on 2 weeks ago, you revealed that probably some sort of greenish black is
Yeah.
what's on your mind. Not holding you to anything, but that's like the details that people can have.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And I look, let's take a massive step back and keep the questions coming. I will get to them all in due time. I might not pop them all up at the time, but look, the definition of what we're talking about, I want to talk about making individual standalone games, not expansions, but something like Dead Rising, The Long Night. Sorry, is that what it's called?
Dead
The
of Winter.
sorry,
Dead
Dead
of
of
Winter.
Winter. Thank
Yeah,
you.
a long night. Yeah.
Yeah, Dead of Winter, The Long Night. Sometimes I'm terrible with names, which is ironic because people keep complaining that my games names are so similar. Wibble, couple, grabble. But that's part of, how you say that it's a series.
Yeah.
But let's get to that. But, you know, when you've got games, even Yogi and Yogi Guru, it's like kind of not just, yeah, having things that are possible to buy in any order, but it is a series. There's some sort of thing that ties them in together. And how would you define a series? Do you have anything to add to that?
I think there's some that are far more narrative, and that would spawn more from like movies like Star Wars and things. So some series definitely you kind of want to watch or play them, watch them, or whatever you're going to do with a certain media in order. But you don't have to. I mean, you could watch an out of order Star Wars movie and still enjoy it for what it is, or hate it depending on your personal preference. But I think for board games, you kind of want them to be more standalone than a movie might be because they are like a 1 to 2 hour experience, if that, of a game. So our games aren't very narratively rich. They're more just like here's the setting, here's a few characters you can grab onto quickly, and it's more about playing the game and enjoying the mechanisms and the choices and that kind of stuff. So for us, our I guess philosophy of what we're talking about is more about building a brand. So
Hmm.
a series of products that people can quickly go, oh, I know that. I like that first game. I'll probably like the second game, and give them something that kind of satisfies what they would expect from that game, I suppose, rather than just here's this completely new product that you know nothing about, and you don't know what to expect. You don't know how deep or shallow or not shallow, but quick the game might be, or whatever. So we are still working on it, but I think when you see the Miko's art and that font face, you should think, oh yeah, 60 to 90 minute kind of medium weight heavy Euro game. That's what you should expect.
I really like what you say about building up a brand because it doesn't have to be a continuation of a story. And for sure, board games are more expensive than DVDs or Blu-rays. And, you probably spend more time with a board game that you really love, I'm going to say. Sure, you can have like a film playing and then you're kind of just working. I know someone who used to, I can't remember I think it was like Shawshank Redemption. They used to have basically a film playing. Instead of music, they would just work to the sounds of a film playing. And they would know all the scenes, so it would kind of spark them, and they would be drawing comics, which was their line of work. But I'm going to posit that for most people, you spend more time with a board game replaying it and delving into it again, and the author has less control. But when you talk about branding, you think about I think about the Alia Big Box series, if you're familiar with that,
Yeah,
where they're all from different designers, and so I'm not going to start naming the designers, but you've got these. Okay, it's kind of old-fashioned Europe, pretty much. It's like now I think about it, it's all kind of scowling white dudes on the boxes with a lot of the artwork. But
yes,
like
you're
they've
talking
got
about
the
games
big,
like Trajan and lots of Stephen Fell games. Yeah.
yeah. But then like yesterday, I was chatting to Alan Paul and they were saying, yeah, we're going to do lots more pocket campaign games. And they've got like the Cousins War, they've got Ming Voyages and March for Progress, and these are kind of war-ish games, but they play in like 20 to 30 minutes. And I think the key thing is that you build a set of expectations
Hmm.
and you have that, okay, this is what you're getting. And even Friedman Friese's stuff, you could argue that Friedman Friese's stuff is some sort of series because you get some expectations because, okay, it's all green, it all starts
Yeah.
with the F. And if you've got the Fast Forward series, that itself is a series. Like okay, it's the fast forward. It's got like the little bit of branding.
Yeah, and I think with Friedman Fries, he's very much like he is the brand. You've seen his bright green hair and stuff and his green suits, so like people can associate with him far closer with his products than you think. You just pull a game off your shelf, and you might not even consider who the designer is. It might not even cross your mind. You probably know the publisher, but yeah, but with Friedman Freeze, you're like, oh, it's a green box. It starts with F, in German at least usually. So you're like, oh, it's his game, And his games can vary quite a bit in what they offer. But if you enjoy his design style, then you can probably trust his products.
Yeah, and it's definitely admirable how Friedman Fries has been able to do so much, and even within, and yeah, Verfalun Sicker says what we find most helpful always is that the iconography is consistent, and some of the parts of each game has an appearance in the other parts, but still the games would feel completely different. And that kind of brings me to like the advantages of this, which kind I hadn't thought about it in terms of branding, but that's kind of a big part of what it is. Saying, hey, this is what you're getting, setting up those expectations before you're able to meet them, right?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe it's just me. I'm sure it's not just me though. Obviously from the proof, but people enjoy sort of a progression when they've had a bit of a nice, if it's a movie or whatever, a book or a game, they've had this like enjoyable experience and they want that to continue in some form. Even like with music, like you find a band you like, you're waiting for the next album, and it could be a wreck, and you might go off the band, but they're kind of wanting that the next thing. And board games are the same, I think. So I think if I just keep putting out games that weren't part of a series, a lot of them will just fly under the radar. They'll just go, oh, that one kind of got forgotten. People didn't associate with the artwork as much, or whatever it was. So doing this series kind of knows that you're building this, a bunch of people that enjoy these style of games, and they're not going to miss one because they know every year there's kind of a new one coming out, and then yeah, it's good. It's good. I think just clever marketing for a business point of view. But even as a designer, it's good because it means that our games are being noticed, a lot better.
We've got some disagreements whether, whilst everyone's going to agree Fast Forward is a series, we can quibble about whether Friedman Fries's games are a series just because they're green. But yeah, sure, maybe it's not because it feels like maybe like for a series, does there need to be some sort of progression to it? Like because with the North Sea and then the West Kingdom, you've got like this increasing corruption that you've talked about, how people get more and more corrupt, and then the land turns darker. Although I'm imagining the South series will be brighter, at least literally, because hey, it's the South. Come on, it's got to
Yeah.
be bright. Surely, I don't know what's going. But do you feel like that sense of progression? Like, do you think you need this kind of overarch, yeah, an arc of some sort?
Yeah, for our trilogies, I think for sure, because we know there's an end. We're not going to do northwest and southeast. It's just there's going to be an end to it. And I agree that not all of Friedman's games are a series, but the point is that his green covers and his names of his games re-emphasize his brand and who he is, so people can associate his games with him. Um, but for us, yeah, they're definitely meant to be a series. And whereas ones like we've got Razor Scythia and we've got Hadrian's Wall, they have a similar aesthetic, but they're not meant to be a series. But they've still got that similar branding and art style so that people can go, oh, that's kind of like that one. And if they enjoy the art and the style of the game, they might enjoy this one. So, yeah.
And Xate says if just color matters, then even Haba games could be considered a series, which is a really good point. It's
But
kind of
it's still their branding, though, right? Like, the yellow box.
yeah, but
It's
like
not
I
a
guess
series.
what we're deciding is that a series is kind of partially it's kind of like a branding, but it's even more specific.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's kind
Brand within
of
a brand.
yeah. And morning, Alan. It's lovely to see you. Um, depends on the games. Sticking with Friedman Freese's Small Box Flea, Fast Forward, they are a series, but all separate games.
Yeah.
Um, now, why did you decide to make this series? I know we've talked about it before. but is it just a case of, hey, people have enjoyed this one, it'll be easier to make something based on the same thing? Did you want, like, what were your motivations?
So I basically just stumbled into it, really. I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't really. But I did shipwrights, and then people just keep saying, well, what's the next? Why can't we raid? We built these ships. They're Vikings. Why can't they raid? And that just made me go, oh, I was at that point, honestly, like going up to that Kickstarter, I was thinking that would be my last game. I was like, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. I might just finish making games because it's fun, but got to start growing up and all that kind of stuff. And then put that game on Kickstarter and didn't realize I'd get that kind of attention. So when that worked and things, people started going, oh, I want you. They like these games, and from this random guy in New Zealand, I thought, oh, let's try make another game. This is fun. People actually want to buy my games now for some reason. Um, and so when Raiders actually got a lot of recognition and attention because of the actual mechanisms, that's when I was like, well, I've got to make a trilogy. It just makes sense to me. Why would you do 2 games and then stop? Trilogies are just a nice way to finish off a
Hmm.
series. And even at that point, I had no ambition for another trilogy. But then, as I was seeing this kind of growth in my company, I was like, well, we have to do something smart with our marketing because we could just go, yep, and then drop back down, and then that was fun. But I really wanted to build something, so that's when I was getting that serious consideration of what comes after the North series. So yeah,
So, look, I'm not having, I'm not denigrating the desire to make money. Obviously, it's, an important thing, and I support people making money for the craft. It sounds like this was basically um, a financial decision, like it was to kind of ride the success of the
yes and no, it's
original
both.
game.
So for it definitely, like it's a business, so you want to make money. No business wants to not make money. But also it's like it's a creative thing as well. So going, what is the next thing I'm going to create? If you have this framework or this at least direction to go in, like, well, I know I'm going to do a West series, and at that point I was thinking of South Pacific at that point. I'll do like a South one, like the multicultural and stuff, and the Pacific Islands. And that I couldn't design anything. I wasn't sparking it. So then Sam brought me Architects, this real rough prototype that he had been working on, and I was like, that feels like a kind of French game, like the Franks. So that's what led to making the next trilogy in France. And then when we committed to doing that, it was like clear, oh, we've got to stay medieval now. Like the other games all have to be medieval. So because I was thinking at one point maybe it's like the South Pacific, it's the Wild West, it's the East Dynasty. Like just change time zones, but time periods. But now that we're in that medieval, it's like, well, this is locked in. Like this is a thing. So and people, it's good. It means as a company and as designers, we have something to aim towards. We know that in 2022 we're releasing a South game, and we can now start working on it. So otherwise, you kind of, as you know, as creative people, we can just flounder around with not much direction if we don't really have a framework to work to. So it keeps us focused, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I guess it comes from that notion that restrictions breed creativity. So
Yep.
once you've kind of done it, like you've got this universe that you're enjoying working within,
Yep.
and Javier talks about, why, hello to Jay from 3 Minute Board Games. Lovely to chat with you. This
You're up
morning we
late.
had a wee chat on, I say this morning, earlier this evening. Um, but yeah, we've got someone talks about a potential game series where they're meant to play in sequence to tell a bigger story. Have you considered anyone doing things like that for your games? Was that ever part of the plan?
So we do the Rune Saga for the North Sea and the Tome Saga for the West Kingdom, but they're not really narrative stories. They're more just like a campaign mode, so you can some of the achievements you pull off in the first game give you abilities in the second game, and you're kind of working towards getting. It's quite light as far as like what it offers narratively. Um, we did an RPG for the North Sea. It was sort of like a gateway RPG for board gamers who haven't RPG'd before. And that helped us kind of expand the North Sea a little bit with more artwork and more characters and showing off some of the traits and more focus on that kind of stuff. So that was fun. Um, but nah, not too much. I mean, the thing is, like, me and Sam are very much game designers and developers. We just love making games. We love creating puzzles for people to solve and that kind of stuff. We're not hugely narratively driven if it's not already obvious in our board games. Um, so yeah, maybe in the future, who knows? I mean, like I could see things like comics and all sorts of stuff, but that's not my forte. So I got to stick to what I'm good at, I guess.
So let's talk about, was there anything that gave you pause for embarking upon the sequel or for the third series? Did you have any worries about difficult second album syndrome? Do you think that second album syndrome even has an analog in board game design? Am I
Absolutely.
just
Like,
talking out of my bottom?
no way. But that you know, when I first started designing, I had that same thing. If I made one game and I thought, can I do another one? Like, is it possible? And then you make another one, and you still think, can I make a third one? But then it goes on for like 10 years, where you're like, can I still design? Is it just a fluke every time? Um, and that sort of gets compounded when you do a series because you've got this kind of expectation that in a year's time the next game comes out. So you've got that feeling like, can I make a good game in a year? Luckily, I have Sam McDonald to help me now, which is great. So it's not all on my shoulders. Um, but yeah, that's definitely a thing. Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into like the general tips, because this is the key parts of it. Like, people have different ideas of how similar they should be, how different they should be. Verfel and Zucker made comments about the different complexity of games. Um, they talked about some guests were kind of disappointed that part one feels so different to part three, and they gave a suggestion to just try and stick to a similar level of interaction within the series. But then you've always got dissenting voices, and you want to, obviously, people who play it within a board game cafe might be happy to have, things that are very similar, but then people who are actually paying the money to buy it themselves wants a wee bit more variation. So yeah, how do you balance that?
So the framework really is like stick to an hour to 2 hours for the game time. Medium complexity. It can go up and down a bit. So Paladins is very much me and Sam going, let's make this game a real brain burner. It's going to be a table hog. It's going to be big, and it's going to be unashamedly of what it is. So that's like what it is. But yeah, as far as like complexity interaction between players and that kind of stuff, I'm quite happy having variation because it keeps them fresh. Um, and it means that maybe someone won't enjoy the whole trilogy, and that's fine. Someone might just love architects and not like paladins or viscounts. So for me, that's perfectly fine because there's so many games out there. You don't need to like every single one of our games. And I think we want a bit of variation within our series so that there are highlights for people. I've got people who just love explorers, and that's their favorite game of all our games. So, and then some people like saying they couldn't stand architects but love paladins. So
Hmm.
it's I think it's good to have variation for that reason.
And Paladins is the meatiest of all of the things. So if, for someone who wants a heavier experience, you would recommend that one. Whereas for someone who wants something a bit lighter, then you would recommend some. I mean, none of your games are exactly breezy and frivolous. There's always a bit of pondering going on, but there's certainly 1 to 2 hours. That's like twice as much. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of
Yeah.
variation there. And um let's without any narrative ongoing thing, I think this ties into the key difference between films and board games, where films, it's like you might not watch all the Star Wars films, but the expectation is that you will watch like the main 9 ones. I'm so out of the loop. Have they finished that?
There's nine. There's all the spin-offs and all the series, and yeah, there's
Well,
nine
like,
main
did they actually
Skywalker
finish it?
movies.
Is the ninth out already?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, you can tell that I'm not much of a Star Wars person. I mean, it's cool. I enjoy it, but anyway, um, look, it's with board games, because the idea is that you just replay these things, and you get so much variation within the one game because that's the ideal. That you and so you aren't putting numbers on them like Alia did. You're not putting 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, which is an interesting marketing move that they chose. That some people say, well, I don't like this one so much, but I'm going to buy it anyway, just because I'm a bit of a completionist, and especially with all those numbers, I don't want to have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. That just feels wrong. So I don't like number 4 as much, but I'm still going to buy it. But
Yeah.
you haven't gone down that road.
That's never actually even crossed my mind to put numbers on them. I guess because the first one wasn't just meant to be one. So, but yeah, I can see why they would do it from a marketing point of view for that very reason that it's like, and it's also but in one way it might seem bad, but it's also good because you know if you're missing something if you really do want to collect them all. So I get emails from people asking like, can you please let me know every single possible promo there is for Raiders so I know I have everything. They have to have everything. And like while that might seem an extreme, I get it. Like we're all collectors. Most of us board gamers are collectors, to some extreme. So I get it. And people don't want to miss out on anything. So yeah.
Hmm.
But no, I think yeah, it's definitely. I know it can be confusing if you show up one day and see that there's these three blue Viking games with similar fonts and have no idea what came first. But ideally, the games shouldn't. How you play them shouldn't matter. You can play them in any order, and it won't really change your experience of the actual game. So that's our kind of aim, I suppose.
Um, I'm not sure what Jay is referencing. My game is number 13 in a series. Um,
I
but
think he wants to design the 13th game. Is what he's saying.
oh, okay. As in their game. So you've got the 12 ones that are about the Earth, and then Shem's one, Jay's one, which is about space,
Red
is
Dust Rebellion. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that. And yeah, this is what it gets into. Like, you can't please everyone. Some
No.
people don't like that variation, some people do. And do you, like, do you have any? Do you ever kind of do any work to kind of say, hey, this is what you're getting from this. This is actually quite a bit meatier. How did you present that? Because it's about me setting expectations. Like when you think about what is a good game, to my mind, I don't know if you agree with this, or like we could have a 1 minute tangent, but to my mind, a good game is a game wherein you tell people, hey, this is how it's going to be, and then you have you meet those expectations whilst also giving them some surprises along the way. So, like, if you say to someone, hey, this is going to be a really simple game, then Paladins would be a terrible game. If you say to someone, hey,
That's cool
this is
stuff,
going to
Evan.
be a really simple 5 minute, um, take that game, then, there's so many terrible the points. It's like you've got to somehow, and marketing kind of ties into that, which is a really interesting thing. And so it's all contextual, which is the thing I'm realizing more and more. But how do you kind of set those expectations?
So yeah, you're definitely right. Like branding and artwork and things help or should help to reinforce what the game's going to be a bit like, as far as the weight of it or the strategies and things like that. So we've got that funny thing though where Miko's artwork is cartoony yet gritty, so it's like it could throw people off. But if you see a game with like little pretty foxes and things, except now I'm thinking of Root, but cartoony kind of game, you think it's probably a family game. It's got cute little
Hmm.
cartoon characters or animals on it. You wouldn't do that, although Root's obviously breaking the mold of like doing that with a heavy asymmetric game. But that's probably just clever, because they're breaking that mold.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And so it's a weird one. It feels like whole, but specifically to Paladins, when that was coming out, how did you kind of convey, hey, this is going to be a bit meatier? Don't get this if you are expecting something as simple, might not be the right words, as architects.
So it's a lot of it's just done. I know it's not going to reach the general public, but it's very much like we'll start kind of dropping that stuff in social media, like, oh, my brain is burning playing this prototype, or rah rah, and then we'll have obviously review videos come out before it's released, so people can get an idea of the game, and then people just start sharing their comments, sharing it to their friends what it's like. So a lot of it's just word of mouth, that kind of thing. I don't know as far as, I mean, the box cover of Paladins looks heavy. Like it looks, like a big. It looks like almost like a war game as far as like the guys on the front of the guy and the heels on the front cover. So it gives that feeling of weight, I suppose, and like intensity. But I don't know. I don't think it's a huge thing because our games aren't like from party game to like 6 hour long war games. So they're still quite close together, even though some are slightly heavier than others. And I think if you've played Architects and you want something more, Paladins isn't exactly a massive step up. It's just a little step. So, yeah.
I mean, hello, Lee Sprout. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this name, but thank you for joining the chat. And they suggest having a weight system. And I know that Teams and Cosmos in general do this. Like they have, okay, this is the complexity, this is the puzzle solving aspect. Actually, here's
on the exit games, right? They do it.
Like any of the games kind of grade certain things out of 5 or whatever. And but that's a very you need to then give new information, and people need to understand what this iconography means.
It's good. I think Cosmos, their target is very much mass market retail in Germany, so and worldwide. But so that's great information for them to have because their target is not necessarily board gamers. It's like the public. So it's really good information. Whereas our games, we definitely target board gamers. So people who buy our games most likely know what they're buying. I think when they get it.
So you kind of expect people to understand a little bit more about the games before.
I think so. I wouldn't want to drop Paladins on someone who's never played a board game before. That would be a bad experience, I think. So, and we know that, like, we're not trying to target our games at mass market, or I shouldn't say mass market, at people who haven't played sort of more entry level gateway games or medium weight Euro games. So, yeah, got to know your market, I suppose, is the thing to take away.
And good night, Jay. Lovely to have you. And Manuel suggests that ratings on the box might be really good for not just light games, but also meaty games. But let's be honest, when you're in a board game cafe, I don't know your board game cafe, but I just know based on chatting to people around the UK, the games that are actually getting played are so simple compared to what a board gamer might consider a simple game, if you know what I mean. Like to actually have someone who's up to playing even Pandemic is a rarity. Like most of the people who come into drafts down the road in London, where I worked for a month, and it was like a really interesting, just okay, let's check out how things work here. Like so many people would just want to play literally random roll and move games, or and the number of people who would be like, I really want to play Risk or Monopoly. Like people just want to tap into their youth, and they don't want to own these games. They know that they're not great games, but they just want to have something to roll some dice around while they drink.
Yeah,
that's why.
And that's perfectly fine, Yeah.
And so Würfel and Zucker is, The Board Game Association I am in has their games color-coded by complexity, but it feels like the more you try and distinguish, the less ubiquity you've got, and a bit of ubiquity thing that, okay, you've got these colors for these 3 games, this artist for these 12 games, well, excluding, expansions and whatnot. And obviously I'm aware that only 6 of the main games have come out, and you're in the middle of this. But how do you balance, do you think? Is there any other tips that you could give us if anyone's thinking of making a follow-up? about balancing that similarity and meeting people's expectations and making sure that no one's disappointed versus having something where people still have lovely surprises and still think it's worth buying the new game and are not being ripped off.
Yeah. Oh, that comes down to a lot to you, like your personal design philosophies, I suppose. I know personally for myself, I know I just released Rise of Scythia, so that's like might sound funny me saying this, but I never want to like just redesign the same game, um, with the expect with the what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to do that and then try and sell it as a new game, like, and say like, oh, this is different, but it really is just a rip off. Whereas City is like, this is basically version 2 of North Sea, so people know that. Um, so when we go to make a new game in this medieval series, Sam and I are very much like, how can this game stand out from the other games? Like, what can we do visually, mechanically? So some of the big things I come at are like the table presence. So you'll see like Shipwrights is a drafting game, very small table presence. You got Raiders with a big open board. Explorers is a hex-driven tile laying game, and you've got Architects again as a big board, which is more like Raiders. And then you've got this big, long, sprawling thing of Paladins, so it looks very different. And then Viscounts is this 10-sided rondel-style mat board. So I always try and think, how can this game not only play different, but look different? So moving forward in the south, where we're focusing a lot on dice for the games, so they're going to stand apart. We're not going to do anything with virtue or corruption. Like we're not going to touch that because that's all very West Kingdom. So just doing stuff like that is just finding where you can find points of difference, and we always go at it trying to make a very fresh game. And then when we've got that game working, we start doing little pullbacks like, oh, what if we used something like kind of like we did there, but new, put a twist on what we did in that game. So it gives it that same, like it feels like one of our games, I suppose. Yeah, but it's a fine line to kind of to walk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying about saying, okay, this series is the corruption, this series is the dice, and I do, have you got abroad? I mean, you don't have to tell us. I'm not asking for any scoops. If you want to, then that would be lovely. But have you got a kind of constraint in mind for the East?
No idea.
Okay.
Honestly, I have no idea. But I went south because I knew that the east, which is the Byzantines, the Eastern Roman Empire, is like would look visually very similar to the Franks because it's very similar, kind of not the same, but they're quite similar culture because they're very much influenced by the Romans, the original Roman Empire. So I thought let's just jump into the desert, into the south, and just make it look way different. So dice, we're focusing a lot on all the kind of scientific and mathematical advances they made at that time period. So it's very different focus. Whereas the North was like all about glory and death, and attacking and exploring and stuff. And the West is like basically trying to build up this kingdom while there's all this bad stuff going on and dodgy people doing stuff and everything. And so the South is like going to be a bit more isolated, we think, and focus more on like physics and mathematics and astronomy and all sorts of cool stuff. So should stand apart, I think. I hope. And then the East, who knows?
I mean, yeah, you've talked about just wanting to work on what you're currently making it as good as you possibly can, and
Yeah.
it feels like at a certain point, like once you had started the second series, once the fourth game came out, it was anyone with some logical, it doesn't take a big leap of logic to say, okay, there's going to be 12 games in the series. But then beyond that, like there's so much details that can come further along the way. Like, for example, you look at Star Wars, which we've turned out, Jay said the ninth film wasn't very good, so apparently I don't need to worry about seeing it. I don't know, do you like the ninth film?
That's funny. Yeah, the people who don't like certain Star Wars movies don't like it for the narrative usually. and I just don't care about the narrative. I just love the world and love just
Hmm.
watching and enjoying being in the world. So I'm probably easily pleased with a Star Wars movie, and I just enjoy watching them. So yeah,
Like, so you
I
just
am
enjoy
mass
all the
market.
spin-offs?
Yeah, I enjoyed. I loved what's it called? Now I'm gonna Rogue One. That was a great movie. But
Hmm.
I enjoyed the Clone Wars series. You know, I'll play Imperial Assault, and I just enjoy the world. So I don't care what we're doing. I just like being in it. So yeah, that's just me though.
Interesting. Like, it kind of ties into your own notion or theme of, yeah, setting rather than immersion, let's or
Yeah, yeah.
narrative. And obviously, narrative being a difficult thing to portray via games, let's say, just because things can pop up in any order generally. And unless you're doing like a legacy game, then is there really any strong narrative in any of these games? I mean, you
No,
would
so
all.
I basically just write that 1 or 2 paragraph kind of intro for each game that you see in the rulebook or see on BGG, and that's just like all I need. Like here is the setting, this is who you are, this is what you're trying to do. Enjoy the game. Like that's kind of all I need. All I feel I want to add. We could add like all these character studies and like this is the king and where he lives and rah rah rah. But like we don't want to just sugarcoat our games. Like these are meant to be crunchy Euro games, and that's what they are. So who knows? We could embellish the story later, but it's not really a focus for me because I just enjoy playing games. I do enjoy narratives, but I enjoy playing games more.
And it sounds like, whilst you talk about theme, you do come from a very mechanics focused mindset. I mean, you say your theme first, but ultimately, um, am I right in saying that you're kind of it's the mechanics and the rules that kind of keep you playing?
So for us, the setting is, and the sort of the very soft story that we would have is more like inspiring the game we're going to build, and then the focus is the mechanics from that point, and the theme or the setting in our sort of position more is in is kind of like inspiring mechanisms or um, making us question should that be there because of the theme or how can we really make that theme stand out further mechanically. So we're really trying to make the best game mechanically, and use the theme as I guess plumb line would probably be the right term for what we're doing in the game, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like enjoy both things during the game, ideally,
Yeah.
but there's this sense of cohesion, dice, and so you've got this mechanical restriction, and look, the your series like is a really. Sorry, this is really remiss of me. Is there a name for the series overall?
Nah. No. I've got
Uh,
some ideas like floating around if we even need one, but currently it's just keep them
like,
as
because
separate
people are
trilogies.
going to want to start referring to it. I was going to say like your Cardinal Direction series, but
Yeah,
that just
yeah.
sounds really boring.
Yeah. Sounds like a map game, eh? Like it's I don't know. Who knows? We'll just call it Middle Earth and see if we get sued, I suppose. See what happens.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to call it your Middle Earth series. That sounds like you're making an actual Lord of the Rings game. How about your main series? I'll just call it that for the remainder of the show, and then you
A
come
lot of
up with
people
a
just call it
better name.
Raiders. I mean, so many people call it Raiders. They're just like, oh, the Raiders series. So who knows?
Just because that was the one that started it all.
Yeah, yeah. That's one that kind of sparked the popularity a lot more. So
Yeah, I mean, it could be the
games by
Old
Shem
Earth.
Sam.
You could call it Old Earth rather than yeah, the world of Shem. Shem World, says Manuel
It's
Correa.
catchy. Shem World, yeah.
That doesn't seem. That seems a bit too.
What we'll probably do is we are definitely throwing around the idea of a 13th game that brings them all together. Like that you play as one of the four factions in the game. So maybe that game will be the title game.
Huh,
Sum it up. Yeah.
I like it. It reminds me of this podcast. Do you know on board games? the
Ah, not
podcast.
sure. No, I don't think so.
But they've got Inverse Genius. That's the one. So they called their channel the Inverse Genius channel, and Inverse Genius is actually the last show that came up. So rather than like the Dice Tower network, it's like the Inverse Genius network where basically they had on board games, on RPGs, and then they had like one about escape rooms. And Inverse Genius is just about everything else that doesn't fit into those things.
Yeah.
And then like, but look, your main series, like the really interesting thing about it is that it's got like these subdivisions. Do you know what I mean? Because quite often it'll be like, okay, Alia, there's no more relationship between number 1 and 3 than there is between 1 and 7. And
Yeah.
with my own LDEC games, there's no more relationship between um, Wibble and Grabble, like two of the early games, than there is between Wibble and Couple, which came a little bit later. And so it's just that they all use the same deck. And so I honestly can't think of any other game series that has a similarity where you've got, I mean, I guess you could draw a parallel to Friedman Freeze's output. We've got Friedman Freeze, if you consider that a series, which we decided we don't. But then you've got like the Fast Forward and the Fabled, which never really became a series. But yeah, I do, like. Do you get what I mean?
I know we've been talking about Star Wars a lot, but Star Wars would be similar, I suppose. They got three trilogies basically in the
Mm,
Skywalker saga, so I think it helps because it helps. It's like breaks it down for you. You know, if it's just 12 games that all tie together, that's quite overwhelming. Whereas if you're discovering this in like 6 years' time, you could just do some research. You go, I think I'll try with the East first. You know, that looks like the theme appeals to me more, and the mechanisms
mm.
appeal more. So you could just do that. You know, so I imagine that in the future, 20 years from now, if people are still playing our games by then, they might just keep their favorite from each trilogy, and have just 4 games. So who knows?
Okay, I'm aware that I am, making you stay up past your usual bedtime, and so I don't want to keep this going too long. I want to talk about winging it, then come back to Circadians a wee bit more before we wrap up, if that's
Sure.
cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
in terms of winging it, it sounds like, oh, and Verfland Secure sounds. How about the Valeria series?
Yeah. Yeah. So Isaiah, who runs my Daily Magic Games, is a good friend. So we chat a lot of Essen and Gen Con and stuff. So with Valeria, that's much more open. There's not a trilogy. He can just keep putting out more content in that series, which he's been doing. So I've just got Margraves of Valeria. So that's slightly different. Yeah, it's more like an open-ended series, which is kind of what we're doing with Circadians. We're not saying it's a trilogy. We're just going to go. This is a setting, a series, and then we'll just release games now and then in that series.
Bye,
See,
Paul.
Paul.
Thanks for joining in. Um, it sounds like your overarching plan is incredibly loose, and you're very much focused on, okay, you started off, let's go back a little bit to your most recent trilogy, okay, the West Kingdom. You started off with yeah, this is how I'm going to change things, and then you thought about each game as it came. Is that a fair thing to say? Like, you weren't thinking, okay, they are going to get more complex, it's just the way they turned out.
Yeah, that's fair. When I was first throwing around that I was going to do something by another compass direction, um, I had the consideration of keeping it medieval before I tried doing something else. But if I knew that if I was going to do a Frankish game, or there's going to be a game called Paladins, because I'd done some research and I was like, that is a really cool word, and it's usually used in fantasy and high fantasy, role play games and stuff. So, but I've never seen a game that's about the actual Paladins, which are basically, if you don't know, that they're like the French version of the Knights of the Round Table. So they're like very much, um, what's the word? Kind of, there is some history there, but they're kind of embellished quite a bit through poetic writing. So it's kind of fun to play with because there's not really full accuracy about who they really were and what they did. But it's a cool word. Paladins just sounds strong. So I knew there would be a game called Paladins. And then when Sam showed me what was Architects, what game Architects, I was like, well, this isn't Paladins. And we tried to kind of put it into maybe like a Squires kind of theme of, you're a Squire working to help serve your knight, which might lead into Paladins. I was trying to think of this whole overarching story, but in the end, that just felt like we were trying to force Architects to be something it wasn't, which is why we were like, this is a very generic theme, building buildings in France, but it just worked with the mechanism, so that's what we ran with in the end. But we kind of tie them together more by these virtue systems within each game, virtue and corruption. So yeah, still quite a strong connection within those games, regardless of the story's not as fluid as the North Sea. North Sea's like we build ships, we raid, we explore. Very simple to grasp. But, yeah.
Do you have any regrets or things that you would have done differently for the first 6 games?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's like mechanically there's things I'd change in the earlier games because I've learned so much since then. I mean, Sam already has regrets about games that are just coming out because he's like, I wish I'd changed that one card. It's like after like 6 months of playtesting, you'd think you'd have it nailed down, but there's always something. But I would actually change quite a lot of the iconography because I changed throughout the series. I've made quite drastic changes. So if you, for example, after all the West Kingdom games, we went back and played Raiders a few months back, and straight away Sam looked at the icons. He's like, "Hey, do I get a debt card if I hire this guy? Because it's got a black card with a white cross." We're so used to like debt card being a black card, whereas in Raiders it's hiring a crew member. So just things like that, like having consistency of what the icons do. But that's so minor. That's just me being a
I
bit
don't know.
OCD.
That feels like a fairly, if someone's going to come to it, like in 7 years' time, that
Yeah,
feels like a
yeah.
fairly major thing. Like, do you reckon that you might even do a new edition and make some tweaks, like for all the iconography to unify it all?
I
I
always, yeah,
understand your thing that you don't want to upset people who supported you at the start,
that's it, yeah.
but like if it's been so many years since it first came out, like would you be like, okay, let's re-release it just to kind of bring it in line with what everything else is, so it's kind of okay, closing it off, doing a
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I started working on an expansion idea for Shipwrights. I was like, knowing what I know now, I'd changed so much in that game. Um, and I started working on one. It was working really well, but then it got to the point where I was replacing the entire deck of cards. I was like, this is basically a new game. Um, so it's like I think I've gone too far. You've got to get to the point where you realize that that's what the game is. Some people might hate it, some might like it, but I'm just always thinking, let's make the next game. Um, so that's just me personally. I just want to keep making new games and hopefully improve as we do more and more. But I don't know. I'm not ruling it out that I'd come back in 20 years' time when I've got nothing left in the tank and redo some of the old games. But yeah, it's not really a focus for me currently.
now. We had someone saying that they love your games, they even own a copy of Plethora, and they just want to ask again why the art style was changed so much for Raiders of Scythia. I think we've already addressed this. It, but
That was to separate it from Raiders of the North Sea. Otherwise, people think, oh, it's part. Is it a new version? Is it part of the same trilogy? That was to make it. This is definitely not part of the trilogy. Yeah, had to stand apart.
Manuel says, I've seen other games make small tweaks in further printings and people weren't upset over it. It doesn't validate their copy. I mean, Pandemic, changed quite well. It was more graphical in that instance.
Yeah,
But there was quite a furore, I believe.
yeah. There will be people that are very angry because they've already supported it and backed it, and whatever they've done, and they've poured money into it. So yeah, I don't like doing that for that very reason. I don't want someone to feel like their version is now obsolete because it's not good enough. But I also understand sometimes games need a fresh. Like we're getting what is it? There's the new Castles of Burgundy. I think it's just come out this year. So there's going to be a bunch of people that go, oh, my version's now no good. Or even Brass, we had new versions of Brass come out a year or two ago. So it happens, and there's always going to be someone who's not happy. But I guess it comes down to timing and that kind of stuff.
And Manuel Correa says for Pandemic, it was about all the expansions people might have.
Yeah,
But if you change the iconography in Raiders, that's going to invalidate potentially those promo cards that might
yep,
have like the old style
yeah,
of
yeah.
iconography.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So, yeah, let's finish up by talking anything else you want to say about Circadians, because I wanted to talk about this again because it almost feels like the deeper point to me is that it feels like once you've got a successful game, is making a series the natural way to progress? Are you going to be known for having a game and then you delve into a world and then you just stay there? Do you know what I mean? Like, once you have a game that's done quite well, is it natural to just bring out a follow up if you can?
Um, yes and no. I think for me, it's kind of like a learning curve I've been on, or Junior been on, where I've done a bunch of little one-off games here and there, and I've sort of learned like that game doesn't suit my brand, or so I shouldn't really just do these one-off games for that reason. I just to give you a bit of insight into my what's going on in my brain for the last few years, so I can kind of picture like coming to my website and you see like three kind of illustrations saying choose your world. You've got the medieval, the sci-fi, and whatever else, that kind of thing. So you kind of more these are our three or four brands or whatever we do, um, and kind of push them that way. And the reason behind Circadians, I don't know how long that series will run. I have no idea. It might be two games, and it might be it. Who knows? But the reason for that and giving it a shot at least was that obviously I can see that we're going to run out of West Kingdom directions, or medieval directions on the compass at some point. So we should really start just experimenting and trying new things and seeing what people respond to. I guess. Yeah. So that's kind of the motivation behind Circadians, is like let's just try something completely different. Let's go sci-fi and just see what people think and if it connects or not. Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense that that didn't come from your brain because you've gone on record previously as saying you don't really connect so much with the sci-fi world.
I don't connect so much with sci-fi games. I love sci-fi on TV or movies. But yeah, for some whatever reason, when it comes to board games, I think I own like two sci-fi games. It's just what I don't know why it is, but I just love Sword and Shield kind of high fantasy or medieval setting for play. It makes sense to me, I suppose. I can get into the world a lot quicker than I can with ray guns and blasters and things I don't quite understand, I suppose.
So do the games you publish need to be games that you would want to have?
That's a good question. And I'll probably say mostly yes. So Circadians 2, I'll admit, is not really my natural kind of game, but I know it's a really good game because I'm very much not really enjoying like area control style games, high conflict games. It's not super high conflict either. It's very Euro-y, but I know it's not my preferred wheelhouse of what I like to play. But I know it's great, and I've enjoyed playing it for what it is. So that's different though, because it's Sam, and he's working on it. He's designing it. So, and I'll obviously help with a bit with development, and I'm doing all the product development and art direction and stuff on that. So that's a bit different. But yeah, if I'm gonna take on like just a different designer that I haven't worked with, it's probably going to be something that I love to play. Um, yeah. Whereas Sam gets a bit of more of a free pass because I know him personally and trust him, and yeah, that's a bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it's a really interesting one, kind of that, yeah, desire to make something because it still says Phil on it,
Yeah.
like, Garfield, and it's still got your stamp and it's still got, yeah. And so there needs to be a little bit of you in there, I guess.
Yep.
But it sounds very much like, from what you've said, okay, it might last 2, it might last 20, I guess, if you keep coming up with new ideas. and there are ways that you can progress this world. And it seems like everything that you've done, there's been a mixture of just chancing upon it and having a vague idea for, okay, what's the next one? And yeah, it's a really interesting way to work. I mean, it's been such a fascinating conversation for me, looking at, like, I was really excited to have this conversation just because I do see parallels. Like, obviously, it's again totally different. We talked about, like, with the L deck, where it's a game system, and I'm recently trying to make all the individual games, actual standalone products.
Yeah.
So you get the instructions in them, and just for that one game, and there's different typography and stuff. So even if you could play all the games with the one deck of cards, the point is to say, hey, these are all different. And you've got like this similar but completely different problem where it's, okay, we want to say, hey, these are all the same, or the same world, or the same artwork, and I think that in this day and age of thousands of games being released every year, I think that having that ubiquity is almost more important, at least from the point of view of the box cover, than the name and the branding. That ubiquity seems to me to be more important than everything else. And so that really leads us to the wrap up, where, do you have anything else to talk about on the topic of
I can tell you a funny story based, to prove the point that people get confused. Is this year for the Kennerspiel nominations, they had the shortlist, and we knew that Paladins was on the shortlist, and they had the live stream to announce the top three, and in the pile of the shelf for Paladins was Architects of the West Kingdom. And here's our shortlist. I was like, that's Architects. That was last year. But just because they just thought, oh, let's grab that box off the shelf, put it on the pile. And I think at that point I thought, it's probably not going to get a nomination because they don't care enough to like double check that's actually the game. But yeah, it's quite funny. It just, there's always going to be some confusion. That kind of goes with it, I suppose. But yeah, I think the payoff.
That must have been a slightly sad moment.
It was kind of funny, actually. We honestly knew it was way too heavy to get nominated. It's like it's a really nice acknowledgement to get to make that recommendation list, but we just knew, like, no, that's not going to get nominated. No way. So, yeah, that was fun.
Thank you for sharing that. So I think we've just talked about so much. As I look at my notes, we've talked about cutting machines, we've talked about drinks, we've talked about conventions, Spiel Digital, and of course WellyCon, which I'm really excited to chat to those couple of people on Friday night UK time or Saturday morning New Zealand time. We talked about bands, music, Prodigy 6. We talked about branding. We talked about Circadians. We talked about your love for Sam, and we talked about general cost and time of games versus films and stuff, and the differentiation. And we talked about Star Wars a lot. We talked about the similarities of things that, of things within your worldly series. Let's call it that, the worldly series. That's what I'm calling it for now. And I'm not going to change until you come up with a better name. I talked a lot about the fact that you're winging it and you didn't disagree. And so, and we talked about like needing to add something new. And we had some comments in there that some people are, not liking the variation. Some people are loving the variation. And even in these comments, like there's so much, variation in opinion, which ties into Maya's kind of comment that you just cannot please everybody. And that's it. And I love your attitude of just, really thinking about trying to make each game the best it can be. And if some people only like a tiny fraction of them, or if someone only likes paladins, then that's cool, and at least you've made one game that you really like.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so, yeah, thank you so much for the chat.
Thank you.
If let me grab the links from the thing to paste. Do you have anything at all you would actually let me go slightly out of order? And firstly, thank everyone, including obviously Shem Phillips, but also everyone watching, just for chatting along. It's lovely to have you watching. And obviously, this stays up on YouTube. And so thank you for all the comments. Thank you, I'm sure, yeah, for behalf of Shem for all support, I guess,
Yeah.
unless you want to say anything. But over to you. What are you up to? Now you can say anything you want to, but still keep it PG rated, please. So, is there anything that you're looking forward to? Hopes or ambitions? Share anything, whether it's exciting or trivial or important or just fun. Yeah. Manuel says, thank you. This was fun. And oh, I just so do you want to say I'm looking forward to seeing Chris and Nicole tonight. I've got some big plans to chat to about with them, like some things to put into place that, yeah, people will definitely, my life will definitely be different in, yeah, this time next year. It will be completely different, I imagine. And lots of love to, yeah, I have nothing more to say. I'm going to have a bit of an easy day. I'm definitely going to do some cleaning today. And Shem, anything that you want to share at all, in terms of what you're up to tomorrow,
I
or
so I'm it's 12:30 currently. I've got another video interview at 9 o'clock in the morning. So it'll still be the same day for you technically, won't it? Yeah, that'll be interesting. So yeah,
huh.
yeah, 8.5 hours.
Oh man, sorry, I
So I've
didn't.
got my chocolate. I've got my chocolate milk for tonight, and I've got my Red Bull for the morning, so I should be fine. Yeah.
Thank you so much for like joining. If you want to, how do you like to be found?
I think at Garphill Games will pretty much find me on most of the social medias that we're on. I sound like an old man when I say that. Social medias. Yeah. On the websites. Yeah. Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, Twitter, we're mainly on.
So, Saints hopes to get HH at some point too. You, oh, that might be chatting to Verfel and Zucker. Alan Outson's going to definitely play Arkham Horror, the cards game today. Definitely. Thank you for the comment, Verfel and Zucker. Oh, HH is Hamburg. How does HH mean Hamburg? I don't understand. That's a weird one.
Hamburg.
I mean, there's only one Hamburg. Anyway, so if you want to find me, I am stuffabeds.com, stuffabeds.com, twitter.com/stuffabeds, instagram.com/stuffabeds, twitch.tv/stuffabeds. I'm here every day at 10 a.m. UK time, which is currently 11 p.m. New Zealand time. And you can find all the old stuff on youtube.com/c/stuffabeds, stuffabeds.com/discord if you want to go to the Discord to chat about making a series, or there's also a chat channel where you can just post pictures of cats. It's called the Cat Chat. I've got the BBBB chat, the idle chat. There's design chat where people chat about designs, and there's also the cat chat, which come and air the pictures of cats or cats that you drew or photos that you took. So yeah, for next streams, look at stuffabeds.com/streams, share, spread the word. I'm going to quickly on Twitch see if there's any musicians or any cool people playing that I can recommend. Uh, ooh, Alu Sam, let's go and Raid Alusam because they play lovely music. And so if you are watching on Twitch, then this is going to be some, gentle, serene music that you can listen to afterwards. And so it has, again, just look, it's not about lags. Just sometimes I just post up the things after the thing. Um, Lots of love to everyone. And do you have anything left to say?
I am nothing left to say except for thank you. It's been great. And thanks everyone for being involved in the chat.
It has been wonderful, and hopefully I can have you on at some point in the, not too distant future, like maybe when like to talk about some of the design lessons, like, and to keep an eye on your future stuff. It would be lovely to chat to you again, and
Yeah,
maybe by
definitely.
that point, the time zones will be different again.
Yeah.
But I feel kind of really guilty, kind
Oh
of.
no, not at all. Not at all. I don't mind. Once you get past 10 o'clock, you may as well stay up till 4. It doesn't really matter, does it? So.
Oh gosh, oh man. But I see you and Xates are people of a similar mindset. But lots of love and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye.